Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints panel. Fast food chains are refusing to put calorie counts on their menus. Later on, we'll be talking about loving mom no matter what. Stay tuned. And these are the issues we'll be presenting today to our Viewpoints panelists for commentary. Should fast food restaurants be forced to put calories on their menus? New York is forcing the issue and being met with defiant opposition. Some Facebook incidents are prompting calls for schools and students to study the issue more closely. And the issue of gang violence raised again following the stabbing of 4 teens at a Toronto subway station. Later on, we'll be talking about loving mom no matter what. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Shirley Smith is a speaker, author, and storyteller, and Vernal Banton is an author and a life coach. Thank you both for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the first issue we're talking about, obviously, we know what's inspiring this, the obesity epidemic that we're seeing North America-wide and in many ways worldwide. Now, this is happening in New York, but as we know, sometimes things start, not just sometimes, very often in the States, comes over to Canada. It's something that, it's an issue for all of us really, that New York has actually, well, what they're doing now is actually forcing fast food restaurants to put the calorie counts on their menus, and unfortunately many of these fast food restaurants are opposing it so much that it's actually gone to court now. They're saying, why do this? It's even impossible to include it on a menu because the menus will be way too long trying to do so. But perhaps they're just trying to get out of a little bit of trouble here, considering what some of those calories look like. Question is, do you think it's fair to do this? Do you think it's time that this get done? Shirley, what do you say?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's more, for me, it's more than the calories, because I work a lot with senior people, and many of them are suffering from things like high blood pressure and cholesterol and all those sorts of things that can be affected by certain foods that we eat. And if they know ahead of time what's in the food, well, then they can make better judgment of what they're eating, and I think stay healthier. Even if they don't get fat, they can have other health problems, and I think it's good that they know what's there.
But you think the calories are a good start? Because I know that New York has been really leading the pack on this issue. They've proceeded, too, to start banning saturated fats as well. You think it's a good idea?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Vernal, what do you say here?
Well, no trans fats is very frequent nowadays, which is great. I think that even if you actually put labeling and tell the contents, it doesn't actually stop people from doing it. So I think that we, in their defense, I don't necessarily think that it has to be a bad or good thing. First of all, it should be good that they just give the consumer the awareness, because that's something that any producer should be doing. If you're producing product, you should be labeling it and explaining what's in it.
But do you think it should be legislated that the restaurant owners actually have to put the number of calories on for various dishes?
I would say sometimes yes, only based on the fact that she's talking about more like, say, obesity issues. But I think sometimes it's like when people are trying to just be more healthier just because of just being have a healthier lifestyle, they need to know that what's the fiber content, what's enough vitamin C. I think it's just good for product knowledge. You need to know what you're putting in your body. But what I'm also saying is that in their defense, just because you put it out, it's on the smoking labels as well. And we still see people, it has not gone down by the amount of consumption for cigarettes. I don't necessarily think it'll make a difference, because I think when people want to eat what they want to eat, they will. But I just think that the wise consumer thing, the value-added service in retail, you would want to advise your clients on what they're eating to promote, healthier lifestyle and better choices. And I think that's the edge that they should be focusing on, not so much the obesity.
But do you really think it's in the hands of the restaurant to be educating the public, or should it be in the hands of the people themselves to try to increase their own awareness when it comes to what's good and what's healthy for them to eat?
Well, a lot of people have allergies and they don't necessarily know what are in certain products. They don't understand necessarily what's this whole thing about MSG, or let's start using no trans fats, right? So I think that bottom line is, when you don't know, I think it is pretty much incumbent upon the companies to kind of get that value-added service, as I said, to actually educate the consumers. It's not any different than if I was to put out a self-help book.
See,
you want to educate people.
I'm all for public for public knowledge.
And awareness.
And I know there's been a lot of campaigns out. I mean, even here in Ontario, we saw that there was a ban on having the pop in the schools, and I think some moves are a good move. But from the point of view of putting it in the hands of the restaurant owners to educate the public on basically everything on the menu, I really have to say that's going too far. I mean, they're in the business of selling food. When you go to the groceries and you decide to buy some cookies or a bag of chips, you know full well what's in that food. And if you look at the side of the box, yes, you do see some of the content, so people do have some awareness. But when you look at the complexity of some of these menus, I don't know if it's possible. Plus, they have some choices. Do you want this with cream? What kind of a salad dressing do you want with this? How do they cater to everybody? I don't know if that's fair. The saturated fats, I can see, but the logic of having all this information out, to me, the simplistic form is perhaps the calorie count.
Perhaps, but I think also too when you're seeing, for example, the actual content and you understand, for example, if you saw a chicken that was baked versus fried and you saw the difference in calories, I think it would really educate consumers on how to make a better choice for them.
But you see, that's why I like that issue with the calories from that perspective.
Okay.
I think it's going way too far to try to put contents of all the food types on these menus, but I think it could be a rude awakening. I mean, I hear that the average entree is something like 1,800 calories in a restaurant, and I'm not talking some of the restaurants where you have these burgers and
Yes.
the greasy stuff. I'm talking the regular restaurants that you go to, the ones that you would go and sit and eat. I'm trying my best not to mention any names here, but
I'd agree.
you've got the baked potato, you've got the piece of steak and maybe
Yeah.
the bread there and the salad. That's what I'm talking about here. And the average is 1,800 calories per plate.
Yes.
Now, when you start getting into the real, the burgers like that high and all the fries and everything else that you might add to it,
Plus the
my
sugar
goodness,
on
like
top.
double that. So
Yes.
maybe it's a rude awakening.
I think it is, because most people have no idea at all the number of calories that are in these foods. They have no idea. And you were talking about the groceries that we buy. Well, yes, on the side of the boxes, they state things that are in there, the nutritional values.
And that's
yes.
simplistic, yes.
Yes.
Because it's on each little container. But with a restaurant that has so many different entrees, that could also be terribly difficult to try to itemize all of the nutrients in every entree and in every combination. But the calories, that's pretty simple.
I'd agree, but also sometimes I think what you have to understand too is the more that you're actually giving to the consumer is you're empowering them to make better choices, but not just the better choices, you're helping them maybe avoid potential allergies. Some people, for example, are allergic to certain things, but they don't necessarily understand that it's also correlated in other products. Like, for example, maybe people are not used to, say, for example, having eggs. They don't necessarily think of mayonnaise as eggs, a principal main ingredient. So if they're having allergies or any like allergic reactions to it, at least by that way, when it's more disclosed, you're giving consumers a lot more empowerment to say, oh, like having a better awakening when they go into a restaurant.
You know what my concern is about society, that we're spoon-feeding people too much? I mean, there's an onus on people, and then there's this other side that I want to ask the two of you about. Do you have any concerns about being in a nanny state where people have basically relinquished their ability to even try to find out what's good for themselves, and you leave it up to governments and organizations and whatnot to try to do all the homework for you? I mean, I have a concern about this.
Well, I have to say that if you're also, I mean, I don't think that because, for example, say a large corporation is actually going to put it out, means to say that that's the end all of it either, because a lot of times when people put out things, they sometimes have a vested interest in what they also disclose. So I still think it is up to the consumer to decide, with that given knowledge, should I go back to my doctor and say, look at this diet, or my dietitian? So I think it's a first step, but I don't think it should be the ultimate step.
Well, yeah, there's just not enough hours in the day. I'll give you one quick example. Somebody told me they saw this, and I thought it was horrendous, on the bus, where there was a kid. The kid was under 2 years old, and drinking a bottle full of pop? I mean, give me a break. You've got people still doing these things. What are you doing to the kid? I mean, you're proning the child to obesity from that young and type 2 diabetes. But, like,
not
how
one.
far does people, I mean, so much information
That's
is
that
out
point,
there.
yes.
People have been beaten over their heads when it comes to the damage of pop. I just don't see that the onus can be on all of these organizations to be trying to baby people and spoon feed them. I believe in public education, but I also believe in human free will and some onus on adults, for goodness sakes.
But I'd have to say that when you're looking at companies that have been putting out certain product, sometimes these type of movements actually trigger better menu choices. There's been a lot of restaurants, for example, they would do every baked and desserts fried, and some of them, for example, they've now changed it from fried to being baked.
And I would like to think people
You know,
have that knowledge to know the difference instead of the people
Exactly.
having to tell you, well, look, write it on a piece of paper. This is fried. This is how much oil I use. This one has this much calories. This one has this much protein. This one has, I mean, to me, it's just going too far. The calories, I find the most simplistic approach, but to go beyond that, I just find it, I don't know.
But you know, I'm thinking you're talking a lot about allergies, and a lot of people are allergic to nuts, peanuts, that sort of thing.
of different
And
size.
companies
Yeah.
have included that.
Yes, they have. They
Yes.
say may
But not all
contain
companies-
nuts.
But not all companies, though.
No, but a lot of
yes,
them
they
have.
do.
Bigger
Yes, they
ones
do.
do.
Make
Yeah.
contain nuts. For the big ones, they do.
The
Yeah.
big ones do,
Yes.
for sure, yes.
Yes.
And if we could do that somehow or the other with some of the other things, I think that it would be beneficial.
It's just
for
that
people to
allergies
do
are
that.
endless. I don't see where this could end.
That's true,
That's
too.
that's my point. Well, we're going to go for a break now. Facebook, do we take it at face value? We'll be talking about some problems after the break. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. We're now talking about Facebook. It's very popular, in fact so popular that now even politicians are using it. I'm talking the major ones, the leaders of all the main parties, because that's their connection with the people and they're hoping to be more, well, consumer friendly. But the article that I'm talking about here, it's the downside of Facebook. It concerns a series of suspensions that have taken place in the Toronto area. I'm sure maybe beyond the Toronto area it ends up being a problem, but some teachers, unfortunately, are becoming victimized, bullied by some students. That it's not just a case of talking to other students about some teachers that you might not like. It's about slandering certain teachers, putting it on Facebook, and everybody can have access. But the article points out that, or makes a suggestion that maybe the school boards and parents need to study the issue more closely as opposed to suspend these poor students. I don't know how the two of you think about it, being a bit sarcastic here. Let's start with you, Vernal, on this one. What do you say?
Well, I have to say that people don't understand the magnitude of slander and libel. They just don't understand what it is. And when you're putting stuff on the internet, you're going to be probably subjected to libel. And if you're saying certain things, but when you're video streaming it, it becomes like a double sword against you. And I think what bottom line is, people have to understand there is a thing called netiquette, so the internet etiquette. And I think that they forget that you have to apply, the same rules apply as if you were actually with a person. And they should know that when you, whatever you say, there's potential, recompense for what you do. So you have to be very careful.
Well, the Ontario, you go ahead first, actually, before
No,
I move
I
on.
agree with what
Yeah.
you're saying, and I'm just wondering what the reason is that these kids are feeling they have to slander their teachers. Like, is there something going on between the teachers and the students? Like,
No,
what's going on here?
frustration. Let's face it. It's very difficult to finger point. You've got some kids that are little terrors in the school system, but you also have the kids that aren't so bad, and they may have problems or some kind of a clash, a personality clash with a teacher. Kids get upset. I mean, what kid could honestly say they went through the entire school system and they didn't have one teacher that really left a bad taste, that they just would have liked to have told a few choice words, but they didn't do it because they would have gotten in trouble, especially how discipline was way back then. And even now, people are subject to discipline if they're openly rude to a teacher. But Facebook, I mean, we all know about the internet that, and it's not just Facebook, that a lot of bullying is going on. You don't come face to face with the person, although it's called Facebook. You can get out your frustrations and some of these kids. And to me, it's not even an issue of what the reason is, whether they have a valid reason to be upset with the teacher or not a valid reason. Does it not come down to just respect for another human being that we are seeing in our society totally undermined?
I have to say this though, I understand what you're saying, but I think you definitely have to respect people, but I think, people are given, their right of freedom of speech, etc. But again, there are repercussions to what we say, so we have to also be what's called accountable for what we say, and have to know that if we, for example, may have to defend ourselves if we say certain things. I think what's happening with the internet, it's causing people that are really introverted to become extroverted people via a public forum, because they know that the hits are there. They know that that there's a lot of magnitude. It gets explosive, and I think that they're trying to pretty much sometimes sabotage some teachers, and that's not a good mirror.
You're talking about accountability here, but I'm not sure that's even recognized in here, because they're saying what they need to do is look into the issue, investigate it, study it more. Frankly, I don't know if that'll even help. I mean, studies are a dime a dozen. If these kids, by and large, have no respect for their teachers, kids are emotional. I could understand it. I could understand their frustrations, but I don't see how looking at the issue and talking about the issue anymore can really help from that point of view. I mean, we've got a larger problem. You know this. The two of you deal with this. Toronto is a place, and we're going to be discussing gang violence, where there are a lot of angry kids out there. Some of them have very deep problems to deal with. So what do you tell these kids? Okay, we're going to talk about it. We're going to just tell you, well, it's not a good thing to do. I'm not saying I have the complete answer here. I don't know if there is, but accountability is a start. How do you make them accountable? Let's hear it.
Well, for me, what I think is important, I've done two basic things. Use arts as therapy to kind of channel out their creative energy,
That is
and that's
positive. That's very
being a
positive.
musician myself and a gospel singer. And then the other extent is I've chose life skills, as in the book, the What Often Win book that I wrote. So I think that I find that if you're training people with life skills to give them creative outlets to basically deal with their issues, or giving them arts as therapy, you're rechanneling that energy that they already have within
Well, many
them
people
for a
have been
positive
talking
source.
about overhauling the education system to include value training and to try to help these kids too.
And creativity, because a lot of them are stifled, and it's through, like, for example, people, for example, that are on substances, they go through a lot of creative means even to rob from their parents when they become so going through withdrawal and go through heavy substance addictions. So what I'm saying is that by taking the creative side, it also gives them the chance to take that energy that they would use to do bad to go positive and be more inspirational than more desperate.
Yeah, I really agree with you, and I'm involved with the arts as well, especially music. And I found, like, I'm a Baha'i, and within the Baha'i community, the Baha'i youth are really getting involved with this kind of thing. We have what we call a virtue program, and they learn about things that will help them to be a better human being. okay, and using the arts with dancing. We've got this dance group like you wouldn't believe. They're just incredible. They go through something like one principle in the Baha'i faith is unity and diversity.
Okay.
Okay, and they'll go through this whole thing where you feel you're actually there with them, and it just inspires you so much. And people not only are inspired at the concert, but they take that feeling outside and you know, try to do something about it. We've
So
got
am I correct
to.
in summing up then that the two of you are in agreement that perhaps all these calls that we see for an overhaul in the education system to include values training, I mean, we say it should be, the onus should be on the parents, but we do have a problem in society. Is it time to change the curriculum from that point of view to incorporate values training and more
think so.
appreciation for the arts?
I think
Because
so.
just saying, well, let's have a conference and talk about Facebook and talk about technology, I don't,
Yeah.
I think it's naive, frankly, this approach here.
Yeah, I think it's important, but I also think reference with Facebook or any other internet sites or like that, I think that people have to understand is that these avenues are becoming more and more destructive just as much as they can be good. And again, through the creativity, they're channeling it for negative uses as we're reading. But if we kind of train people to basically use the energy, if you are going to use a Facebook, to use it more positively, sometimes we don't have to tell people to go through withdrawal of certain things, but just how to better use it. And I think that's the problem in society. We get things that are positive and we're using them for negative issues and negative reasons, and that's the issue.
And it's not a surface problem, and we need to recognize that. It's a
Exactly.
deeper issue.
It's so right in
Yes.
a way. Yeah.
Well, we're going to go for a break now. When we come back, we'll be talking about, wow, the much discussed in the media issue of gang violence. Stay tuned. Hello again and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. The third issue we're talking about, we're discussing an issue of gang violence again. This time we're taking a new twist. Now, everybody talks about gun violence, but this one is knife violence because the bottom line is violence can happen whether it be at the end of a gun, whether it be at the end of a knife. And here we see that 4 teens were stabbed at a subway in Toronto, the Christie Station, and it's related to gang violence. Now, Given the work that the two of you do, Vernal, you've written a book that we have here actually. It's called What Often Wins.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
it's a life skills book.
Yes.
So this is an area that you're working with. You work a lot with troubled youth yourself, and
Yes,
you
and
deal with
adults.
life skill and adults too.
And adults.
And you too, Shirley. You work a lot in the school system. You tell stories in the school
Yes.
system. This is an area that's very familiar to the two of you because you do a lot of work in this area. Now, the angle I'm taking with this
Yes.
is the gang violence that we're seeing in Toronto. Now, I know that the black community has been identified because taking that face value is statistical reality. You see the news, you see the ones that are pulling the triggers most frequently, and it ends up being the black youth. And you see articles that come out afterward that say, well, there's a social problem within the black community. Too many fathers are missing. The poverty issue has been mentioned, but here we see it again, related to gangs. I want to hear what the two of you have to say about this issue as a whole. First of all, do you see it as a black issue?
I don't. The only black issue I see is how the media controls it.
But how do you argue the fact that when the media reports these incidents, and it is a black youth that's pulling the trigger, and it does concern these black gangs in Toronto, how do you defend that?
Well, I have to defend it in such a way like this. A lot of times, because it isn't exclusive to the black community, a lot of times when it's happening elsewhere, especially in high-profile areas, you never hear about it. So that's also
But
the
does it happen to
persuasion
that
of the
degree
media.
in the high-profile areas? Because
Well, you know what? Let's put it the opposite. So let's play devil's advocate. How many times when you see an excelling black youth, male or female, doing excellent, and they can't get featured on a TV show because why? Because that's not newsworthy enough.
you know what? I'm
because
going to
the
say
media-
the
Sorry.
downside of the media overall. That is the downside of the media when it comes to anything that people do that are good on a regular basis. Unfortunately, it's the dramatic stuff that gets reported. And if
And
somebody
negative
wins,
dramatic.
if somebody wins, mostly negative, but when you have Women of the Year awards and these types of things, it gets media attention. It tends to be the events that affect people.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when people are attacked, and we're looking specifically at the black violence in Toronto,
Yes.
when crimes happen, let's say in the Hamilton area, and it doesn't involve a black youth, it still gets reported. It still does get reported, but you see, the gangs seem to be terrorizing the streets of Toronto, and although nobody likes to point fingers, because to me the downside is the good black youth end up being stereotyped as well. That is a major problem. But my bigger question is the black community, the good ones like yourself, working toward, well, against those stereotypes in the sense that, hey, when you guys keep doing these things, you're making us all look bad. I mean, to me, that's another angle.
I agree with that, but what I'm saying that, you know, the media has to take responsibility in terms of what they choose to, they can continue to perpetuate a negative stereotype, or they can actually show another entity. And again, when things are going on in other communities, they're downplayed. Even when there's some things that are, for example, like if it was relevant to the police force or to a high corporate, it's always on, subsided, it's very downplayed. But for the minute a youth that happens to be the wrong place and wrong time, sometimes they don't even go to prove the actual fact. So what we end up seeing is really a lot of media hysteria and, negative stereotypical perpetuation.
Is there a gang, would you say there's a black gang problem in Toronto?
Sure, but I think that wouldn't be the only gang that has an issue. There's Asian gangs problem, there's
And
Latino
those get
gangs.
reported too, though. Like when you
Not
see
the same
Asian,
way,
yeah, but
unfortunately.
if an Asian gang murders somebody, murders always get reported as a matter of course. You don't have
Yeah.
people shooting people in subways, on the streets, knifing people, and it doesn't get reported because it happens to be an Asian person or it happens to be a white person. It gets reported.
However,
It
there's
does, but
still
they don't say
profiling,
it's a
though.
white person that did it.
Yeah, there's still
Yeah,
a
but you know what,
profiling
though?
issue, though, regarding that.
It comes out in the
Unfortunately.
news. The names come out in the news. A name like Chin, we know it's Asian.
Yeah, I
or a
understand.
picture
Or
of the
could be,
person,
yeah.
or a picture of the person comes
Yeah.
out in the news. But they don't say, well, it's a black youth that did this. When you see the paper and you see the face of the person, you see they're black.
Yeah.
I know that the media tends to capitalize on
Profiling.
well, they capitalize on crime, on negativity. But the point of view of profiling, and I know I'm playing devil's advocate here, the media will tell you what's going on. And I know that it's not always a reflection of what's truly going on. A lot gets left out, I know. But one thing I also know is, no matter what race you are, if you're pulling a gun and you're terrorizing the streets, your race is not going to be hidden because you're going to come out in the papers and everybody's going to see who
And
you
I
are.
agree with that, but the same way that they can take the initiative to make it a media hysteria, they can also take the people that are actually doing wonderful things in the community. So let's inject more
Like
positive
Don
role
Meredith,
models.
though. I've seen that done. Don Meredith, he's one of my favorites. We've had him not only here, but I've seen him in the newspapers. I've seen him profiled in a positive way,
Yeah.
doing something. So it's not always the negatives, but something has got
they
to be
don't
done
make
to help
news,
these
though.
kids.
But the
yeah, but no,
news-
I've seen it in the news.
No, I'm
I've
saying
seen
the news is
yes.
not as perpetuated as the negative.
Because it's not the crime. The crime is what's the violence. That's the
Right.
violent part, unfortunately, and the violence always gets reported. My big concern here is, are the two of you satisfied on what's being done, the work that's being done to help these youth in these gangs in Toronto?
Well, you know what? You're saying something here about the stuff that gets reported.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if we kind of cut back on what we report. Like, okay, you got to report a murder, okay? But if we cut back on who it was or, you know, what color they were, that kind
No, but
of
nobody
thing.
says what color they were. It's just the picture
I
comes
think
out in
that-
the paper.
I'd agree.
You're talking about media censorship there, and when things start happening behind closed doors and never gets reported, people don't know what's going on. I find that frightening.
But
But
still,
media
on
just
the
censors things
radio,
any way you take it.
on the radio, they'll say, you know, that it was a black youth.
Well, they'll say they're looking for a black youth. That's when it usually comes out in a descriptive.
And they're also
in a
sometimes
descriptive
going
sense if they're
beyond the
looking.
call of duty to actually, you know, publicize minors as well, which is not normal to do as well. So I think based on everything is that the issue is not so much a black, a Latino, whatever. I think
Mm-hmm.
the issue is their youth that needs to be on a better path and need to rechannel
See,
their energies. And
I see a
that's-
bit of a problem here. I don't see it as isolated
neither
because
do I.
when you look at, for instance, when you look at the predators, the sexual predators that normally come up in the papers, most of them end up being white. Okay, I'm not saying that only the black community has a problem,
Yeah.
but there is a problem, I would say, in this context because there is a black gang violence problem. You hear about the rap music. Now, I don't point fingers there because there's equally or worse sometimes rock music where
Sure, I agree.
where it's when you get into the hard rock, it can be devastating. But
I think honestly, the media in conjunction with the music industry has to have a better pull on what they use to promote in videos because the demographics show that 13 to 25 is what's consuming these products, the CDs, the music videos, the lifestyle, which manifests itself into the clothing and thus bringing to the gangs. It's a really deeper
there needs
hidden
to be
truth.
there needs to be a redefinition of
And
black
we need
culture as opposed to
re-education.
only sports
And really re-educating,
and
yeah.
rap. That I see as one of the bottom
Exactly,
lines.
yeah.
Or
Wow.
basketball only.
Yeah.
Hoop dreams
Well, yeah,
or Mike
sports or
dreams
music.
becoming a singer as well. So there's
Well,
other
interesting
issues.
discussion, and we
This
must
is
come to an
great.
end because our time is up. We're going to have to resume this perhaps on a second half one day.
Yes.
Thank you both so much
Thank
for
you for
joining
having
me.
You're
me.
welcome. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having us.
We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, we'll be talking about loving mom no matter what. Stay tuned.
ground transportation provided by JP Motor Sales, located at 2320 Fairview Street in Burlington.
Hello again, and welcome back to part 2 of our program. I'm Christine Williams. We're now dealing with a very serious topic, and for some of you, it's going to be very difficult. In fact, the name of our subject matter is the name of the book, Loving Mother No Matter What. Joining us to talk about it, Marlene George, who is a wellness mentor and an author, and Hannah Henry is a lawyer and an author. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Serious subject the two of you delved into. What really surprised me about this book is how much you actually covered the full range of what kids, I'll say, I mean, some adults now, according to your book, have to go through. And I know full well that there are people out there that are saying, you don't know what my mother was like. In fact, she was mommy dearest. She was the worst kind of a mother anybody could ever have. She not only abused me, but my dad abused me and beat me up, and he was an alcoholic, and all she did was just sit by and by his side, and she still, to this day, puts me down. Now, that's just one angle. The list is endless. For goodness sakes, you have an example in this book where a mother tried to kill her kid, push her out of a car. Wow. Let's start with you, Marlene. First of all, I'd like to know, starting with you, what was it that motivated the two of you authoring this book?
I've been doing this work as a coach, mentoring, for the past 18 years. And it's been my observation, maybe the past 5 years, in my observation that a lot of the clients who've been coming to me are blaming mom for what's not working in their lives. So that was something that started to make me think that maybe I need to do something about this. And Anne and I collaborated, and then we decided, oh, well, let's do a book on moms, and let's dispel this myth that it's mom's fault. Well, we have stories. We have many stories, as you've addressed. We have many stories, over 40 of them, even some of them internationally, and poems and commentary. And a lot of the stories cover all ranges of situations. Some of them quite humorous, some of them very challenging, and some even show where some of them are still quite stuck in that relationship with mom.
Wow, what a great motivation, Hannah.
Yes, I'm a satisfied client of Marlene's. About 10 years ago, I went through a very, very stressful divorce. It was to the point where my psychiatrist wanted to hospitalize me. And I just was motivated to heal as quickly as possible. And miraculously, I found Marlene. And she helped me so much that I'm eternally grateful. The first workshop I did with her, I realized that a lot of what was going on in my life was to do with challenges with my mother.
Wow. Now, Hannah, just hearing that alone, I think is really inspirational for a lot of people. We've done Open Line for a long time, for years. It used to be a live program, and we're going back again live in September. Open Line again, 2 o'clock. But we would hear from people that will talk about the pain they had in their lives, and some of them felt like they were totally useless. They've never done anything with their lives. But here you are, a brilliant lawyer, an author, and you still had challenges to deal with in your life. Right there, it's very inspirational. But here's my big question for the two of you, and I'd love to hear both of your angles on this. In many ways, how a twig is bent, so the tree grows. Many kids have suffered at the hands of parents. And we certainly don't, and that does not come out in your book one bit. You definitely don't take away the blame, because parents have an obligation, and many of them, not intentionally, have failed miserably. They've abused their kids, put down their kids, and they're still doing it today. Very, very unlovable people indeed. But at the same time, you have the motivation, which is clear, that look, many lives are being messed up as a result of that pain. And this is something I would like the two of you to address in your professionalism with what you've had to deal with and what you've written. How do you even begin to say, well, look, do I overlook this? Do I push it in the back? Do I forgive when she didn't ask me forgiveness? Do I release it? What approach do you take?
We'll speak a little bit about because there's a lot of possibility, the what-if questions. I'm sure you touched on some of those. So I'm going to come back to those what-if questions, but we have choice. And we have choice. That's really what it comes down to. We have choice. And forgiveness plays a very big role in this. And it's not necessary to forgive mom for what she's done, is to, you know, when I counsel the people that I'm working with, I'm saying, are you happy? Are you happy with what's going on in your life right now? And is that not enough on a motivation to find some way to find some resolve here? So that's the thing. And that's what I'm helping them with, to say, well, yes, I hear your story, and it's too bad. Yes, and it's sad. I know that. But are you happy? And are you willing to live your life for the next 30 possible years in the same place? Because you have choice, and you can do this, and I can offer them many things. And so it's entirely up to them. And you can perhaps go from there.
I could say it's that old saw, if life hands you lemons, make lemonade. What I learned from my mother is enormous. I find that she was inspirational to me. She was very difficult, she was very challenging, she was mentally ill. But I am so grateful to her because I've learned so much. And if your life is easy, you're not so motivated to look for answers to questions. So this was something that motivated me to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise done.
Hannah, you found a way to love your mother?
Yes.
Would you say, from just an objective point of view, that she was an unlovable woman?
She was very, very difficult. She was a schizophrenic, so she was delusional and could be abusive at times. And but I knew she loved me. I knew she loved me, and that a lot of what she did, she thought she was doing for my own good. I know she meant well. She always meant well. And on that basis, I think, you know what, to drive a car, we need a driver's license. But to have children, there's no standards, there's nothing.
That's right.
And so you know, they do our mothers did the best they could with the tools they had. And I look at it that way.
We're going to have to go for a break now, but what you're saying there, I think, is a wonderful tool to bounce off from after the break. Seeing the other side, not justifying it, but the way we choose to see it, eventually. We're going to be back after this. Stay tuned. again and welcome back to our conversation. We're talking about the book, Loving Mother No Matter What. Marlene George, who is a wellness mentor and an author, and Hannah Henry, who is a lawyer and an author, are joining us. Both of them authored this book. Now, if we can just have a shot of that book up a little bit longer. There's a story to tell about that particular picture. Who's going to tell it here?
I'll tell it. The picture is my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And in the back of the book, there's a picture of my mother and Hannah's mom. And Hannah's mom made her transition last year. So that's what's in there.
Now what I'm going to do, and hopefully our cameras will catch it okay, is hold this picture up for the camera. The top one there is Marlene's mother, and the bottom one is Hannah's.
And my mother's still alive. She's 88 now.
Wow.
And you should have seen her at the book launch. She was so
Isn't
thrilled.
that something? Now, I love the message that the two of you are talking about here, and the message is basically, it's nothing to do with, oh, we're just sweeping it all under the carpet and letting it go. Your book acknowledges, boy, does it acknowledge the pain that people have gone through. I made some notes here. You talk about Iris's story, where, Mother, where were you? I mean, the title itself explains. She moved in with her boyfriend who abused her. That was the kid there, and you wonder, well, where is the mother here? You've got another case, Martha's story. Mayhem, madness, and attempted murder. Tried to push her out of a vehicle, tried to kill her with a knife, a blade a few times. You've got Sharon's story, the game of life, where they work together, the mother and the kid, with the alcoholic father. I mean, you talked about, the two of you talk about all kinds of moms out there. But is it important to learn to love your mother no matter what for healing to take place in your life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that the challenges I had with my mother impacted every other aspect of my life, and I realized, with Marlene's help, that until I resolved the issues I had with her, they kept coming up with other people. They came up with my husband, my ex-husband. I've remarried to a wonderful man. They came up in my workplace. They're coming up all over the place. I didn't realize it until, with help from Marlene, I realized the emotional imprint.
You did it more for yourself than you did it for her.
I did it for myself, absolutely. Absolutely.
We take ourselves wherever we go. So whatever thoughts we have or feelings about certain topics, it goes wherever we go. So I generally tell my clients, no, moving to Vancouver or moving to Japan is not going to solve the problem.
Problem moves right along with you.
You may get to Japan, and guess who becomes your boss? Mommy.
Yes. You see her everywhere. Is that
Everywhere.
what happens?
So when one person comes to a class and resolves an issue, that sort of encompasses everyone in the family, everything changes. It's the ripple effect. You throw a stone and pebble in the water, and everything changes, and that's what it is. And the key about the forgiveness thing that we talked about is, it's not about, a lot of people say, oh, I've forgiven. And I say, so tell me what happens if I were to say to you, mention this person's name, how do you feel? And if you feel appreciative, then you've resolved your challenge with that particular person. But if you still have those issues coming up and you're feeling angry and you're feeling resentful, then you've done it up here mentally. You said the words, but you haven't changed how you down here. We have to change it in our hearts.
Are you saying there's always something to appreciate, no matter how
Always.
lousy your mother was?
Always. If we have a challenge with someone, I tell my clients, there's got to be something. I have a couple I'm counseling, and she's blaming him and he's blaming her. And I say, there's got to be something good you can say about each other. And they look at me with this blank stare to say, what are you talking about? I said, are they children? Oh yeah, we have kids. Well, isn't that something to appreciate? So with every challenge, find one thing you can appreciate, and if you just find one little thing, she's got a cute nose, I just love the way he dresses, and if that's all you focus on and think about and speak about when you talk about that person, that'll change everything.
Wow, so you're saying it begins with your language, even what goes
That's the
on in
start,
your head.
and then the thought, and then the feeling.
You focus. It takes an active effort to focus on the good points.
Good. And that's why I also created a visualization meditation CD. And on the CD, there's two visualizations. One is for those who are already in appreciation with mom, and one for those who are looking for ways to move past this. And the key about moving forward is your determination. How determined and how much do you really want to have this relationship with your mom? The story Mother Dearest. She's having her mom's very negative, and I can understand why she's in that place. Her mom's even today battering her. And I say, what do you want? I mean, how badly do you want this relationship with your mom? She moved away from her mother. She moved back into the apartment in the same building with her mom. Now she's back there, and they're still doing this. And I say, one of you need to make the shift. And you've been working with the tools. You understand the language. And I'm sorry to say this, it's going to be up to you to do this. And for a lot of people, when they come for counseling, they say, why do I always have to be the one to do it? Well, you're the one that's here. And obviously you have a stronger desire to make a change.
Wow, very interesting. Now we have to go for a break again, but relationship with your mother, that could be very different depending on how your mother is. I mean, I've known of cases where somebody was so impossible to get along with. Trust me, it was better. They didn't have a close relationship with that mother. And I want to hear what the two of you have to say about that after the break. Stay tuned.
Okay, good.
Hello again and welcome back to our discussion, Loving Mother No Matter What. That's the name of the book we're talking about. And Marlene and Hannah, can you tell our viewers where they can get a copy of this book?
Well, you can get it from Marlene's website, which is www.marlenegeorge.com. Also, we are having a book signing in Burlington on Saturday, July the 7th from 2 to 5 p.m. And I'm happy to report that if you come and buy a book, you'll be entered in a draw. We're going to have a draw each hour, and you will receive a free healing treatment from Marlene, which she can describe.
Wow.
It'll be I combine therapeutic touch, Reiki, and cranial psychotherapy, and it'll be on my fabulous music vibrational water table. So it's like a massage table, but it plays music, and you're laying on a water bed base, and it gives a vibration while I'm using my hands to relax
Very
you.
therapeutic. Kind of, you know, people love the feeling of that water.
Yeah,
Now, something you said during one of the breaks, that there has to be a readiness. I mean, some people will cringe, the relationship issue. Well, first let's deal with that very briefly. Some people are so antagonistic. and I've known people like this, that they say, okay, I try to have a relationship with my mother. All she does is interfere in my life, with my marriage, with the kids, and boy, she's a disaster. I'm really better away from her. How do you advise these people? And I know I'm asking you to give a nutshell version, but brief.
It is a nutshell version. And as I already said before the break, you know, just find, if just find one thing about that person you can appreciate. Just one thing, and forget the rest. Just forget the rest. And know in your heart that mom does love you. She just doesn't have the tools, she just doesn't know how. And we all have a story. I generally say in my workshops, who comes from a functional family? No one's hands go up.
But the bright side is you'd have to be pretty tormented yourself to treat your kid that way.
Well, as I said, we have a story, and we can just, if we can understand the story, then
Yes.
it really helps a lot when we understand the story. And the book starts with a lot of thought-provoking questions. What if, before we came to the physical, we chose each other? What if we chose each other? We decided to come here on this planet and have this kind of interaction with each other, and regardless of what we're going to have, the transaction, we are going to love each other no matter what.
And the people with whom we have the biggest challenges give us the biggest opportunities for soul growth.
What a good point of view.
And at the very least, if it's your mother, she gave you birth. There's something to appreciate right there.
That's the most. That's already one big thing.
That's
Now, some will say, I've tried, and I can't. You said that there has to be a readiness. Can you address this?
Well, how ready are you? As I said, I was just speaking with one of the women that contributed her book, a story in the book, and she was on the phone with me last night. And I said, how much do you want to have a relationship with your mom? You cannot, the universe will not support, 80-20. No, it's 100% or that, and that's relationships. I'm in it 100%, no matter what she does, no matter what she says, I'm going to love her no matter what.
What about somebody who says, I don't really want to love her, I want to do this for me. I want to be free of this.
And that's kind of sort of what you did.
absolutely. It impacts your own life tremendously,
Everything.
and everything you do. So it works both ways. But I
Was
think
that the motivation for you from an experiential point of view, Hannah, that when you first went into this, you were in too much pain to think about your mother, doing it for her, having a relationship with her, but it was more a case of, I want to be freed of this torment in my own soul?
I didn't even realize the connection
Wow.
between what
Marlene
was
helped
going
you.
on in the rest of my life.
She came
And
for
amazing.
her divorce.
I came because of the divorce, so I didn't even see that. you
And
know.
someone in the room said to her,
Did you see that relationship all through your marriage? I have to
Yeah.
ask you that question before
she
we
sees
end.
it now. She
In
sees it now.
retrospect, it was somebody said to me, and they said, "You married your mother."
Whoa.
And I said, "What? What are you talking about?" You know, and then I realized I had. You know?
Wow. Talk about that motivation.
Yeah.
Goodness.
That's the key.
Once again, I want you to tell our public, our viewing audience, where to get a copy of this book quickly before we close.
My website, www.marlenegeorge.com, and we'll be at chapters, the one just close around the corner from me, what's in the mall, whatever
Burlington?
that, Burlington Mall. Is that the mall?
It's
Yes, it
actually
is.
Indigo.
Indigo, in Indigo, and we'll be there on July the 7th.
Second. Is that
7th, from 2
second?
until 5. 7th.
7th. July 7th.
2 to
Yes.
5, and on the hour we'll be drawing anyone who visits our table or purchases a book. We will have their name in the draw, and they can win a treatment with me, with my magical hands.
And we're out of time for today. Thank you both so much for joining me. See you again next time. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.